In September 1984, and again in 1986, we held a historic colloquium of women family therapists at the Stonehenge Inn in Ridgefield, Connecticut. 47 women at the forefront of the field of family therapy met to address the role of women in families and in family therapy. The aim of this conference was to share and build a network of colleagues and mentors who would explore issues concerning women in couple and family life, in family therapy training, and in practice, theory, and research. There was some competitiveness in these meetings, as women have generally been raised to compete with each other for the attention of men. And there were conflicts and problems around the intersectionality of gender with race, social class, and sexual orientation. But in general, the meeting provided an extraordinary forum for women who, whenever after in life they met, had a sense of collaboration and sisterhood that had been missing for them in the field before. The women of Stonehenge were an impressive group of therapists with enormous expertise, though often overshadowed in the field by their male colleagues, gendered ways of knowing, and the structures of power and privilege in their professional and personal lives. They had already contributed a great deal to the field, and following the Stonehenge meetings, went on to contribute a great deal more. As often happens when a marginalized group begins to organize, the dominant structures experience them as a threat and become paranoid about their intentions. We've seen this reactivity in our field in more recent years when conversations about race emerged as well. But around Stonehenge, there were suggestions of a witch's coven of radicals and almost as bad of non-systemic thinking. A few women declined to come. One thought gender was unimportant. Another assumed a meeting with only women would be boring. And a few worried about retribution from male colleagues for participating. As the emotional reactivity to the meeting intensified, it was clear that powerful issues were being raised and important unspoken gender-based rules and dynamics were being challenged. The 3-day conferences addressed gender dynamics that the family therapy field had ignored in conceptualizations of marriage and family life and in leading models of therapy. In early systemic thinking, the assumption of circular influence and equal power in transactional processes blinded family therapists to gender-based inequities, imbalances, and abuses of power and privilege in couples and families. Starting with the idea that the family was the source of all dysfunction of its members, mothers had been penalized for their centrality in family life and tended to be blamed for all problems. The narrow focus on the interior of the family ignored powerful influences in the larger social and cultural context. The feminization of poverty, workplace inequities, the lack of child care and elder care resources, widespread domestic violence and sexual abuse were serious concerns. Many themes were addressed, including women's stories and myths, women and work, women and money, mentoring and role models, leadership, power, and the intersection of gender with sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, social class, and other dimensions of life that affected families and family therapy. Participants found the meeting a watershed experience, bringing together thoughtful, articulate women to talk about their lives, ideas, research, and experiences. It fostered many connections among the women in the field over the years that followed. The women in the group, like other women, had struggled with gender issues at every level all their lives, but were just beginning to articulate the issues as they confronted the field of family therapy. Increasingly, women were recognizing the powerful sociocultural influences in larger systems, particularly the patriarchal values and sexism that organized all of our lives. There was also acknowledgement that women often contribute to these problems through their own socialization and behaviors, lacking confidence to assert themselves, feeling guilty when they take disproportionate responsibility for their households, child rearing, and elder care, and when they do not protect and deferred to men, personally and professionally. At the end of the meeting, the participants wrote and published an open letter to the family therapy community, published in the Family Therapy Networker that fall, calling on the field's leaders and influential institutions to join in a critique and transformation of family systems theory and practice, to build a movement for change, to challenge inequities and abuses, and to promote equality for women and men in the field and in family life. The published message read as follows. In September 1984, 47 women family therapy trainers, theorists, and researchers, representing many points in the life cycle, assembled at a conference at Stonehenge in Connecticut to advance practice and theory in our field by addressing the role of women in families and in family therapy. We were concerned that the family therapy field had ignored the category of gender in conceptualization of family life, and that our theory and practice have too often blamed the victim. Under the guise of systemic thinking, family therapists have assumed that the interior of the family was the source of all dysfunction in its members, holding women ultimately responsible for family functioning and penalizing them for their centrality in domestic life. By ignoring the complex relationship between gender hierarchies inside the family and sexist social structures in the society at large, family therapists have tended to psychologize what are ultimately political injustices. Family therapy interventions typically involve pulling back the intrusive, over-involved mothers. The labeling of fathers as absentee or distant has been much less pejorative. Such characterizations are the inevitable products of a society that discriminates against women economically, politically, and culturally. In addition, the massive demographic changes in contemporary family life require a critical appreciation of the sex-related consequences of separation and divorce. As long as women are reduced to near poverty, stripped of whatever social benefits marriage had provided them, and too often left with the sole responsibility of parenting, family therapists should feel morally obligated to move beyond the systemic myth that husbands and wives hold equal power in families. We cannot ignore the fact that all family therapy interventions are political. As we know, we cannot not communicate. Ignoring the political aspects of the lives of the families we see supports the status quo, and the status quo supports inequality. We call on all family therapists, theorists, and researchers to join us in a critique and transformation of family systems theory so that we can build a movement for change in the field. We resolve to challenge sexist theory and practice within the field in our work settings, workshops, and conferences wherever it appears. This will include a commitment to promote women and women's professional development until we are equal with men in our own field. And finally, we intend to extend these challenges to the larger political arena whenever and wherever we can. In the years ahead, women increasingly sought leadership roles locally and nationally and supported each other in writing and publication, in presentations, and in speaking out professionally. The meetings sparked heightened attention to many writing, research, and training projects and publications. Among further forums was an International Women's Colloquium in Denmark in 1991, with 100 women from 30 countries. Women's institutes were begun at AFTA at the annual meetings and at other professional meetings. As time went along, women worked hard to develop better understanding of the intersectionality of race, social class, and sexual orientation with gender. Growing awareness prompted changes throughout the field, not without some struggles and setbacks, yet with greater appreciation of the fuller possibilities of both men and women as equal partners in couple and family life and in advancing the field of family therapy.